This is Train to Perform, the undisputed alpha podcast in training, fitness, and sports performance. Here, you'll develop your skills with the cold, hard facts in fitness, sports performance, recovery, and nutrition. Real, tried and true, evidence-based facts that have been proven to move you faster, move you stronger, and move you forward. Now, here's your host of Train to Perform, Julian Sisman.
And welcome back to the Train to Perform podcast. Thank you again for all the listeners. We really appreciate everybody that listens to this podcast. Hope you guys get a little bit of something out of this. Today we have Tim Lebbossiere, who is the assistant strength coach and does sports science with the Boston Bruins. We talk a little bit about his path, but we get really into the nitty-gritty of the strength conditioning with ice hockey, but also how it relates to, other sports and how the programming and things that they do can translate to other sports, and how other sports can use some of the ideas. And as many of you know, I work with a lot of soccer players, so I got some tips from him. And to be honest with you, there's some things that can be used, again, like I said, with other sports. We talk a little bit about power, speed, how they test and figure out fatigue. We also talk about sports specialization, how it relates to hockey, and how it relates to other sports, and much, much more. I just want to give a little insight on what you are about to listen to. Hope you guys enjoy. Please share, rate, and hope you guys enjoy. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for joining me on the Train to Perform podcast. So as I was saying before, I just kind of go with the flow, and just kind of tell me about who you are, why you got into the strength conditioning field, how you got into, where you are as the assistant strength coach, sports science at the Boston Bruins, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, Julian. I'm excited to talk to you here. I started out kind of in a weird way in the field. I grew up as a competitive gymnast and went to Springfield College to do gymnastics with the idea that I wanted to be an exercise science major and open my own gymnastics facility, and kind of use that to be a gymnastics coach one day. And I had done a little bit of strength and conditioning myself, but really dove into it as a freshman at Springfield. And that's when I kind of realized that I really like the sports performance side of things as an athlete, and that realizing at the time I was at one of the best colleges you can go to for the field as well, coincidentally. So just kind of ran off with that, and did some internships at some good places that were local. So I went to Holy Cross and Quinnipiac University. I did an internship at UMass Lowell when I was in grad school as well. So all great schools that have hockey, and just kind of kept snowballing that hockey experience into a GA position out in St. Louis, Missouri with Lindenwood University, where that was my first full-time position working with men's and women's hockey, and was lucky enough to have some good connections to Kevin Neild at the Boston Bruins to get me over to originally work with the Providence Bruins, their minor league affiliate, and was lucky enough to get the call up to join the NHL ranks this past summer. So excited to be here. I am in charge of all the reconditioning for our injured players on the team, but then take control of all the sports science side of things too, both on and off the ice with that stuff.
Awesome. Are you originally from the U.S.?
I am. Yeah. I'm actually from.
You kind of have like a little accent. I thought you were sound like you might have been from like Canada.
No. You know what? It's funny. I hang around people from Canada all the time, so I think it's one of those things. I probably do get a little bit of it just from being around them. But I'm actually from right outside of Boston, so being back here with this team is awesome that I grew up watching. So I'm only like 20 minutes away from my parents' house that I grew up in, which is cool to be back and close to them since I've moved around quite a bit over the years.
So you started at Springfield.
Yep.
Did you initially go there for strength conditioning, or was it just like you went in and kind of like general studies, and then it just kind of like, oh damn, I'm at this like, pretty well known, exercise science, strength conditioning place. Like, why don't I just like take a stab at it?
For sure. Yeah. It was I actually went in as a business major thinking like, okay, if I want to open my own gym one day, then business is the right thing to do. And we had to fill out like a freshman year survey or something that was describing what we wanted to do. And when I filled that out and kind of described it, they at the time had openings for their exercise science department, and it told me that what I was looking for was a little bit more directed towards that because I wanted to do some personal training and stuff like that. I really had no aspirations of doing sports performance at all. But then, intro to exercise science, whatever the first class I take, I start learning about it and I start doing strength conditioning as an athlete myself, as a gymnast there, and really just kind of like that. I'd be curious what it would be like if I played a different sport in high school and strength conditioning was a little bit more common. But being a gymnast, I honestly never really trained too much until I got to college. So that's when I kind of really fell in love with it and saw both sides of it, both as the coach side from the classroom, but then the athlete side going through it on a day-to-day basis.
So you actually did gymnastics at Springfield?
I did. Yeah, I did it for 4 years. They're one of
nice.
15 colleges left in the country with men's gymnastics. So it's a dying sport, but I was lucky enough to get on a team that was still left.
Are you serious? Like there's only 15 in the whole U.S.?
Yeah, there used to be, say 20 something years ago, there was roughly 80, I think it was. And then just because of budget cuts and whatnot, it's been slowly dwindling little by little.
Are they is it all one division now, or are they still like 1, 2, and 3?
Technically it's 1, 2, 3, but we all compete against each other. So Springfield's a Division 3, but we competed against only Division 1s. And there now has been a division, I believe it's 2 school since I've graduated that has rejoined and gotten a men's gymnastics program. But they all compete against each other. The only difference obviously is from a scholarship standpoint. So the Division 2 and Division 3 schools are obviously at a little bit of a disadvantage there. But But we still like to compete and put ourselves out there for it. So it's a good time.
So, okay. So let me ask you this. So you talked about what it would be like as a athlete coming through high school. Okay. I'm gonna hit a topic that is always talked about in the strength conditioning field is, one sport. Did you just do one sport when you were in high school? And then from there, like, if you did do one sport, like, did you find it effective in getting you into college, or do you wish that you had participated in other sports, or at least did some type of strength and conditioning now that you understand and see the benefits to it from, all different levels technically?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great question. I am one of the rare, I guess you can call it, athletes in gymnastics where I did do multiple sports up until I was in 10th grade. So I did gymnastics since I was 4. But then I also played basketball and played baseball until I was in 10th grade, and then realized that gymnastics was kind of the path I was going. So once 10th grade hit, I started specializing in gymnastics. But when I got to college, I'd say 90% of my teammates hadn't played another sport since they were really young, maybe like 7, 8 years old. And that's just kind of how gymnastics is a lot of the times because of the time commitment with it. But what I did notice with that is me and the few people that had played sports for a longer duration of time, we were drastically less injured than the rest of our teammates. I think gymnastics comes with this, chronic back pain and shoulder pain and all this other stuff just from the chronic overuse injuries. But me and some other people that had played baseball and, also spent some more time caring about the strength and conditioning side of things when we were in college. We never really had back pain. I had one injury my junior year with my elbow, but that was one of those freak accident one-time things. So none of it was chronic overuse, which I saw a lot of my teammates getting from specializing.
Sweet. Yeah, it's interesting. That's always a topic that it's funny because I talk about that with a lot of the strength and conditioning, people that I bring on this podcast, because I just like to give different points of views. And it's, the common theme continues to be, the athletes that are doing multiple sports seem to be less prone to injury, actually more successful in the one sport they kind of go with as they get older or as they get into college. And I from my personal perspective, I think it helped me because I did play soccer, I would say 90% of my life, and there were the years of like playing other sports, and I think those years helped like just understanding movement. I mean, I never did any type of strength conditioning, maybe once or twice when I was in high school or middle school. And it just wasn't really much of anything. I think over the past, let's say 15, 20 years, I would say this field has grown tremendously.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously because of the science and the research, especially because now, sports science, it's like a huge thing. So let's kind of segue to that. So when it comes to the sports science stuff, when did you sort of start dabbling with it as far as like, different metrics? Like, are you doing, are you guys using some type of catapults or something similar to catapult? Because I know, I'm doing my PhD right now. So like I took I just took an advanced sports technology class with Dr. Mann.
Okay. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yep, I do.
And I know that when you're in an arena, you're not getting a lot of that GPS because of the. So I know they have newer technology that helps with that. So I don't know. You tell me how you got into it, and how'd you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, I think my first few internships realistically was a lot of like meat and potato strength and conditioning. There wasn't really much sports science with that. And I realized the trajectory of what I wanted the career to look like for me, I was going to need to know something about that. So when I went to Lindenwood University for my graduate assistantship, I had the summer to take an internship as a class, and I came back home and made sure I did it at UMass Lowell with Devin McConnell, who was there at the time, who's now with the Arizona Coyotes. He was maybe the most vocal about what he was doing with his sports science stuff. He was posting a lot of stuff on social media about what he was doing and worked with hockey specifically. So it was really intriguing to me. So I went there, and that was kind of my first experience to all technology besides like a just jump mat. He was doing some really cool stuff with RSI for fatigue monitoring on the jump mat. He had GymAwares and Perch for velocity-based training. He was starting to slowly work in some catapult stuff, but was doing heart rate stuff for multiple years with those guys. So
what type of heart rate?
He at the time had Polar, the team system. So then that I got the job with the Providence Bruins right after that summer with him, which was perfect because I got thrown into an atmosphere where we at the time had First Beat for my first year in Providence, but slowly switched over to Polar the next year. But then we used GymAware probably on a weekly basis. While I was there, we were doing some different eccentric utilization ratio equations between counter movement jumps and non-counter movement jumps on the jump mat to kind of determine whether guys were going into more of a speed or a strength group, which was great because down in Providence, I was the only guy there. So I got to essentially do whatever I wanted to do, mess around and use some lab rat for guys that weren't playing on the weekend and test out some new stuff. And it really, helped me grow that side of this profession, which is perfect because now that I've gotten the call up here to Boston, we have gym wear on every rack and use it on a weekly basis here, whether it's trap bar or bench press or something like that. We at one point had force plates, but got away from them and are doing just jump mat stuff again. But the biggest component of my time is the on ice stuff. We do use catapult, and we just have polar heart rate that we pull in through that catapult that just automatically connects to each other. So we're taking that external loading stuff from the catapult, the internal from the heart rate monitoring, but then looking at both of those in conjunction with some subjective questionnaire stuff that we're doing on practice days to kind of see where the trends are from a team basis and an individual basis.
Can you explain RSI?
Yeah, so there's kind of two.
I guess I could say.
Yeah, so the way that Devin was using it at UMass Lowell was the first time I'd ever seen someone use it with a jump mat. So you need essentially, it's like an extra $50 chip that gets put in the Just Jump Mat computer. And he was using it with a drop jump. So I think he was going off of a 18-inch box, land and rebound quick, jump as high as you can, and was using that RSI number, which is jump height divided by contact time, to use that as a fatigue index for central nervous system. Because what a lot of people try to do is use vertical jump as a measure of their nervous system being fatigued, but you can still jump the same exact height, but just change your jumping strategy to make it look like your jump height is the exact same, but the way that you're approaching that power movement is different. So you can spend a longer time on the ground. You can swing your arms more aggressively, multiple different things that you can't see unless you have a force plate. So he was using the drop jump to kind of keep people within a confined time for their contact time that was similar to a skating stride, which is around like 0.3 seconds, and then taking the jump height with that, and then using standard deviations off of their average to kind of put guys in like a green zone. You're above a standard deviation, you're good to go. You can up your weight on your program if you want to, a kind of 0.5 standard deviation above and below to say like, okay, you're kind of normal. So you're just going to do exactly what is on the program, or, below one standard deviation, what their normal is, which is, hey, you're really fatigued nervous system wise. So we're going to either, scale back a set of our main movement, or, maybe pull back on the load to decrease intensity a little bit. There was kind of multiple different ways that we could go about approaching it, but that was kind of the general consensus there.
So to figure out the standard deviation, I'm assuming you do multiple prior jumps, like as like a pre-test type thing, and then use that as like the gauge, like over time.
Exactly. What we would end up doing there, which I thought was a really good system, the way he did it, is he would have everyone warm up, whatever, roll, mobility, activation, dynamic, warm up. Everyone would go through their RSI, which I think he was at the time doing 3 jumps and just taking the best out of all of them. And then he was lucky too. He has 6 jump mats there at the time. So it was easy to get 25, 30 guys through to do 3 jumps. So whatever, he's got all the interns ripping down all the numbers, and then they go into some sprint and med ball work and everything, which, would take say 8 minutes. And during that 8 minutes, the interns would be on the computers crunching in the numbers that they just did. That would automatically update on Coach Me Plus is what he had at the time to kind of give a standard deviation off of that. But yeah, they were they were training Monday through Friday, and they were doing those drop jumps every single day that they were training. So the amount of data that he had on that to get a real accurate average was spot on.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting how he would do that, and then he would do speed work after. Wouldn't that affect the nervous system as well? Like, how would he be like, hey, like you're doing this many sprints or this many sprints? Wouldn't you want to have that number before you do sprint and med ball work? Because, I mean, I know that doing it at the beginning of the workout is important because those are nervous system, intensive exercises. So how did he gauge like, hey, you need this many sprints or you can do this many med ball versus then being able to tell them like, I know the load and all that sets, reps, volume and all that affects as well, but just kind of curious how he figured that out.
Yeah, I think it was twofold. The first part is realistically just logistics. Like if guys do all these jumps and then have to wait around for 5 minutes to get their numbers and they're sitting around. So I think that was the most important part of it. But then the second part of it is because hockey is transitioning to being so speed emphasis with the game. I think the thought process there was like, okay, if we're going to cut out any volume, the volume that I care the least about is the whatever heavy rear foot elevated split squats or the heavy bench press. And I would rather spend, the extra volume doing some sprint and med ball work and then scaling back on the other stuff. There might be a rare circumstance where that wasn't the case, but typically that would come from a conversation that he would have with someone before those numbers were even out about just like, hey, I really feel like shit today or something from the subjective questionnaires that they were filling out every morning. So we had some info before they even stepped foot in the door that could open up those conversations. But most of the time, if we were going to scale back on anything volume wise, it would be the lifting and not the jumps and the throws and the sprints.
That's I like that because I mean I'm in a more private setting, so when I have kids coming in here, the conversation is not really, hey, we're going to be doing jumps today, but sometimes I could do it because I don't have a jump mat. I actually got I'm sure you've heard of it. It's like these little like Bluetooth. It's called Exergo.
Yeah.
That's how you say it.
Yep, we had those when I was in St. Louis, so I know those really well.
Yeah, and the cool thing about those is that it provides obviously jump height, but also RSI.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out how to utilize that with these kids, like even when they come in, because kind of going back to what we were talking about before about specialization. I mean, I would say 99% of kids that come in here are playing soccer. Just because that's my background, or whatever sport they play, it's like that sport. I mean, I'm in an area where like you find a rare case of a kid playing multiple sports.
Yeah.
So it's like trying to bare bones of like sports science. And trying to make sure that they're not more doing things that are going to fatigue them more, especially that's awesome. So what was I going to ask you? So you did that stuff with him at UMass, and then when you so okay, this is what I was going to ask you. So for the catapult and the heart rate, are you getting any GPS, or is this just external load from just the playing and then heart rate, just pure, that's it? Yeah.
So we don't get the catapult hockey data is still new because it's probably emerged in the past 5 years, but also it's different than the field-based sports. Because it does take shooting into consideration and all of that. So we don't get any velocity measures just because you could get that. You just have to get an extra $20,000 to set it up in your arena. But we do get acceleration from that, which is just as important to us, because the way the player load on that works is based on acceleration anyways. So we kind of look at three different metrics for everyone. We look at player load, on ice load, and then we look at high skating load. So player load is just a combination of all the different acceleration zones, including walking, gliding, standing around, which kind of just gives a general picture of the total work that's done. The on ice load takes out those bottom two acceleration zones. So we get rid of the slow skating and the gliding, and we just look at kind of moderate speed and high speed skating. And then our high skate load is a number that includes body weight, but kind of gives those quick changes of directions and bursts to kind of give us a better understanding of what the true high end acceleration numbers look like. Those are the big three that we look at from the external. And then if someone's coming back from an injury, there is some asymmetry stuff that we look at as well. The only issue with the asymmetry is because it's a rotational sport, everyone is naturally asymmetrical. You know, all lefty shooters are going to be asymmetrical to their left side because they're putting more weight on their left leg and they're rotating in one specific direction. So we use that to kind of try and get a normalized range for what their asymmetry is. And obviously, you know, people that shoot more are going to be more asymmetrical, at least in their numbers. And we take that average, same idea as the RSI, we find a standard deviation off of that. And guys that are coming back from injury, we just try and keep them within that standard deviation. That one's a little tougher because I think, you know, a lot of people think about standard or asymmetries and they think 10% is kind of like a nice little cutoff. But a normal asymmetry for, you know, a right wing who might shoot all the time and shoot 100 pucks before practice and 100 pucks after practice, a normal asymmetry for them could be 18. And it's not just because they're asymmetrical, it's because their natural movement of sport is extremely asymmetrical, especially the more they start shooting the puck. So that one is really a case by case number.
And that asymmetry, are you talking about like strength, or are you talking about strength in lower body, upper body? Like what asymmetry are you like? I mean, I know what you're talking about, the rotation, like they're probably planting a lot. If say you're talking about right-handed shooter, you're probably planting a lot on the right and rotating, so you're not putting as much tension on the left leg. So the reason I'm asking that is because I'm thinking about this for soccer, because it's probably the same. It's probably a very similar situation in that if you're right-footed shooter, your left leg, and I know this for a fact, is probably a little bit more stable and stronger than the right side. You're hitting with the right side.
For sure. Yeah. It could be looked at as strength for sure, because we have force measurements that generally come out from there. But it looks at mainly positionally from left to right, because it's right in the middle of someone's shoulder blades. Obviously, it can see which direction they're moving in more frequently, but also how fast they're moving in those directions as well. So I wish I could tell you what the equation was that they're actually pulling that stuff out, but that's why Catapult has all their clients, because they keep those equations pretty close to the chest.
Oh, so they're able to output a number to you, like, okay, because he's right, this is what's going on. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and they do it for both total skating. So just like how we look at the player load versus the on ice load versus the high skate load, they have asymmetry data for just all skating and high intensity skating, which is nice to look at both of those. And that's kind of how we tease out some of the shooting a little bit, because most shooting is going to be considered a high intensity effort based on how fast these shots are coming nowadays. So that's kind of our way of, trying to tease out a little bit of the built-in asymmetry of the sport.
Are you able to use the catapult to dictate someone's training load, or like, hey, we need to pull this person out? Like, are you using live? Is it is it more live, or is it you using data from yesterday, from the day before, for the next day? Like, how's that? Is that how you guys are using it, or is it?
It's both. And I'd say it's a bit more retroactively than it is live. What we tend to do live is specifically for guys that are coming back from injury. We like to make sure they're getting within certain ranges that are individual to them, that are normal for practice before they join the team for practice. Same thing once they join the team, we're using that live monitoring to make sure that they're staying within their practice and they're not overdoing it just because they're heightened from being, excited and joining the team and everything. The other thing that we use it for is for the mornings on game days when we have morning skates. For anyone who's not playing, they always do extra skating with the assistant coaches. So we utilize, what kind of skating we think they should do. If they haven't had a lot of high intensity skating lately, we'll do some smaller area change of direction work so that they're getting some really quick short duration acceleration. But if they've had a lot of that recently, then we try and let the assistant coaches know that we want them to do more longer distance, high speed with full rest work, which the assistant coaches have been unbelievable about working with us with that. But from a team perspective, we have a head coach who's been a head coach in different organizations and teams for, probably 30 years, if I had to guess. So for us to try and tell him on a day-to-day basis, we need to be within this range or whatever. He doesn't really understand that stuff well, but also like his coaching mind is so dialed in that even without us telling him that, he generally does it anyways. The only thing that we communicate to him, and this is a conversation between us, the medical department, and him, is individual guys getting specific days off. And it ends up being more geared towards our older players. If you're in the 30 and above club, you get a lot more days off typically if your loads are showing red on the standard deviation versus, if you're a 23-year-old rookie, like you can deal with it a little bit. You got to almost earn your keep a little bit, and your body's just a little bit more pliable to be able to handle being above your averages.
Let's talk about that. So what's like a how do I want to phrase this? What's like one thing that you notice from, because I mean you've worked with guys in college for hockey, and then coming into the NHL, like what is like a big I mean, obviously they're good enough to play hockey, but what's a strength or weakness that they come in with as far as, the strength and conditioning, fitness, or however you guys want to call it, conditioning, whatever. I say fitness because soccer, but you know what I mean? Like what's like one thing that they lack? Because they do have a combine very similar to the NFL combine. I'm sure there's no 40-yard dash, but some things.
Hockey is really interesting because for the combine, so how it works in hockey is you can only be drafted as a 17, 18, or 19-year-old player. So, if you don't get drafted when you're 19 years old and you're a college player, you're automatically a free agent. So you can choose to leave college at any time and sign with the team. You can do all 4 years of college and sign. So we have a really interesting combination on our team of players who have played in college that were drafted by us before they went to college, and they did 1, 2, 3, 4 years and then joined our team. We have players that never got drafted that were free agents that chose to sign with us after their college career. And then we have some players that were drafted and went to play junior hockey in Canada, and because they went to a specific league, they were no longer eligible to play NCAA hockey because they were getting paid to play in these junior leagues. So then they end up just coming to us right from these junior leagues. And I think what we end up seeing is 95% of the time, I might even say 99% of the time, these college players are in a drastically better spot than the non-college players are.
Oh, wow.
And that's likely a combination of the fact that they're older. You know, if you go and play junior hockey in a league where you're allowed to go to college, and then you go to college after that, you might be coming out of as a senior at 24 years old. Versus if you're going to junior hockey and then coming right to play pro hockey, you might be 19, 20, 21 years old. So that for sure plays a role in it. But a lot of these colleges have not a lot of them, all of them have some sort of strength and conditioning background. You know, some are obviously better than others, but a lot of these junior hockey teams don't have strength and conditioning at all. And if they do, it's a consultant that comes in once or twice a week and just kind of runs something for the whole team and isn't there on a day-to-day basis. So what we see with our college athletes generally is they're older, they're bigger, they're stronger. A lot of times they're faster. The only thing that might limit them sometimes is just their movement capabilities. You know, I think because they're older compared to some junior hockey players, they might have more restrictions from a mobility standpoint, but then also, you know, some of these college programs are very, I'll call it football-based strength and conditioning programs where they're back squatting really heavy and hang cleaning and bench pressing, and there's not a lot of, you know, mobility and movement training, so they can tend to be stiffer. So these younger kids maybe are better movers and are in better shape, especially if they're from Europe. All they really do is ride the bike and run, you know, 5Ks or whatever over there. So they tend to be good movers and in good shape, but really missing that foundational strength and power that a lot of the college players do have.
Yeah. So you're saying these kids that are coming out of high school, even some of them are getting drafted. So, I mean, what percent of kid is going to go straight from high school to NHL? Like, there's a small percentage.
Almost none. I would say maybe if you're a top 5 draft pick at 17 years old, you're going to go right away. You know, but that's like the Connor McDavids and the Austin Matthews of the world. You know, even this past year with the NHL draft, the top 5 kids, I think 4 of them all went to college or were going to be freshmen in college. And all of them went. None of them decided to join the NHL this year. You know, they might decide to join after their year at college, but to make that jump is really hard. You know, even if you're a bigger high school junior hockey player, you might be 190 pounds, but there's some NHL players that are 230, 240 pounds, you know, and if you've never battled on the ice against the boards against someone like that, you get thrown into that atmosphere. It's a shock to the system. So that's why for a lot of people playing in maybe a professional hockey league overseas, if you're European and you stay over there, or going to college to automatically play against some older people, or if you're going to join the pro ranks, a lot of people do go to the minor leagues just to give them, whether it's 10 games or 100 games of one, confidence building, but then also just understanding how bigger the bodies, the faster the speeds, and the harder the hits, the harder the shots, everything is. So a lot of players end up playing at least for a short period of time in the minor leagues.
What about the European players? I mean, you know, this league is filled with European players. I mean, I know that some of them get drafted early. I'm assuming most of them stay probably in Europe and just play a couple years, kind of get their sort of NHL professional atmosphere down, and then kind of come over here. I'm assuming that's what they probably do.
Yeah, I would say that's what happens the majority of the time. The only difference is that sometimes some players we feel need to learn how to play on a North American sheet of ice. And I'm not sure if you know what that means, but over in Europe, they play on a bigger sheet of ice. They play on an Olympic-sized ice rink, which is slightly bigger than what the NHL and most colleges play at. So a lot of times teams might suggest that, maybe they're Swedish players who are really skilled and used to having all of this open space on the ice go and play in some junior league in Canada where the ice is smaller. They're still going to be playing against people that are their age, but then they can learn how to navigate having bodies closer to them at all times and having to battle more against the boards, while still, honing in on their skills with that size ice.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a big thing for them to come over here and play in that. Because when they do Olympics, they're probably used to that, like that bigger rink.
For sure.
And they might be an advantage compared to the Americans.
Exactly. You see a lot of different styles of hockey, I think, especially when, it's the Olympics where NHL players are allowed to go in there. A lot of the Americans and the Canadians have never played on an Olympic-sized sheet of ice unless they went to a college. Like I think University of Minnesota has an Olympic sheet and maybe one or two others. But if you've never played at a school like that, like you've never really seen those sheets of ice. So there for sure is that advantage with the European-born players that's just to a point almost all they know, especially if they've never come over to the States at all.
Sweet. All right, so segueing to something else that just popped in my mind. So when it comes to the strength conditioning aspects of like an ice hockey, professional college, what is the typical sort of like program? I mean, are they? So I know they have a ton of games. So I'm assuming that, and they're constantly, like you said, like sometimes they're gone traveling. So like, when are they getting in strength conditioning? When are they getting in those lifts? Is it very similar to the college game or is their game different? They're scheduling different because, they got to go to class during the week. So like, what's that life like?
Yeah.
I'm sure it's pretty hard.
It is for sure, especially at the NHL level. I'd say in college, realistically, it's pretty easy. I'd say 90% of games are played on Fridays and Saturdays with a Sunday as an off day for those guys. So Monday you come in and you train, and Wednesday you come in and you train. And that's how I think probably 90% of the college hockey teams do it, which makes it really easy to, have either, however you want to do an upper body day, a lower body day, a strength day and a speed day, linear periodization, triphasic, whatever. You can kind of do whatever you want in college, and the schedule really allows that. In the minor leagues for hockey, in the American Hockey League where I started, the schedule is similar, just with more games. So a lot of the weekends they play a 3-and-3, which is just 3 games in 3 days. So we'll play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it is crazy. And you should see some of these guys on Sunday after the game's over. But a lot of those teams, like, they need to make revenue in order to not fold. So what's the best days to get fans is Friday, Saturdays, and Sundays. There'll be the occasional Wednesday or Tuesday game sprinkled in there. But most of the time it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or just Friday, Saturday. When you have just a Friday, Saturday, man, that is the best week ever because you can plan out everything. So that lends itself to generally being the same as college, only you might lift on a, Tuesday, Wednesday. If you play Monday, if you play Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday will be an off day. You might just lift 2 days in a row. Or you lift once in the middle of the week, and maybe you lift after a game on Sunday because typically Sunday games are in the afternoon anyway. So that allows it to be same thing, a little bit more able to periodize. Yeah. Whatever you kind of want. The NHL level is unbelievably wildly different. I have a schedule right here in front of me. we played every other day. Then we had 2 days off, then played every other day again, had 1 day off. It's like it never ends for those. So we end up a lot of times lifting the day before a game, and that ends up being more of a speed and power emphasis day. We do a lot of post-game lifts, which we always try to schedule those on some afternoon game, just because it's easier to convince 20 guys to lift at 4 p.m. on a Saturday versus 11 p.m. on a Saturday.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But then, anytime we have 2 days off in between games where we're just going to practice most likely both days, or have 1 day fully off and then practice one of those days, that's kind of an automatic lifting day. So we just try and essentially rotate some emphases between a strength day, a power day, and a speed day. Mm-hmm. Our strength days is exactly what you think. We trap bar heavy, we dumbbell bench heavy. If you're a smaller guy, you might do some more volume-based stuff. And that almost always ends up being on a post game, just because we typically have a day off the next day when we schedule it and don't have to worry about soreness. But we do schedule those in sometimes on practice days if we have a couple days in between games. Our power days are kind of that in between where we do more contrast work. So we may have a mix of, some trap bar stuff, maybe some step ups or split squats, but we're doing some jumps and sprints and throws with that as well. And our speed stuff always is typically the day before a game, and we'll do, some 5-yard sprints. Maybe we are band assisted explosive push up instead of a dumbbell bench. So that those days get shifted way more towards the velocity end of the spectrum than the force end of the spectrum.
Yeah, that's crazy. I can't imagine lifting after a game.
Yeah,
it's got to be crazy. How you convince them is got to be. I mean, so not only that, so like the lift, and then 2 days from now, I'm taking a sports nutrition class right now too, and I can't even imagine the amount of food intake they're taking within a week, or even within a day. Like, these guys are, because you're burning carbs, especially at the speed and power. Like, there's not much else you're burning.
Yeah, no, and you're right. They're crushing food all the time, and we have food available to them at all times. We're really lucky where we have a nutritionist and then 2 chefs that are with the team. We have a million different kinds of bars and gels and chews for quick sugars or just to fill their stomach. We have fruit all over the place. We have, these little protein balls that our chef makes. We have peanut butter and Nutella and bread and bagels all over the place. And that's just the snack stuff. Then we have breakfast every single day for these guys. We have lunch every single day for these guys. On game days, we have a post-game meal for these guys, plus the food that whatever they're eating at home with their wives or girlfriends or whatever it may be. So these guys are always eating, and it's crazy too, with that amount of consumption, just how lean a lot of these guys are still. We have multiple guys that over the course of our time here have been sub 6% body fat, and we're just like, how is this even possible? Like, I watch you eat on a day-to-day basis, and they're eating really healthy food, but they also like to crush their burgers every now and then when an off day is coming or something. So it's interesting to see the amount of fuel that goes into these guys' bodies and how they utilize it, because it is a feat that you don't see anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine, because besides basketball, like, NHL is probably the only sport that's like boom, 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 right after the other. Games are 3-4 games. I mean, at a high intensity. I mean, not to bash on baseball, but like,
For
you're
sure.
standing in the outfield, you're not doing much.
Yeah.
But
hey, I got friends that work in baseball. It's different for sure. They might be there, 28 out of 30 days a month, but it's not the same intensity that a lot of these intermittent sports are at all.
Yeah, that's funny. I just want to ask you a quick last question here. Actually, two more questions, and then we can finish this off. What are the areas of injury do you see a lot with hockey? I'm assuming a lot of groin, ankles, maybe. I don't know. Only ankles. The reason I ask that is because I'm assuming there's probably a lot of upper and lower body because smashing into the boards and each other. I'm just curious, like what's a constant reoccurring thing that you have to sort of rehab and deal with?
Yeah, we especially for our older players, we see a lot of hip flexors and groins, and that is a combination of just having bony blocks and them not being able to get into some specific positions that they have to force themselves into because of hockey. So if they can't get into them, then the only thing that can give is a muscle. And, a lot of times it ends up being an adductor. That is at the front of our minds when it comes to injury prevention stuff. We've done a lot of stuff with the force frame, which is just now what the groin bar is called. So we do a lot of adduction and abduction ratios and have looked into kind of what are good cutoffs for typical people that have had previous hip injuries or dealing with a hip injury versus people that don't have those injuries in that history and what those differences in forces between the internal and external rotators are. So that's given us at least an easier idea to pop up a red flag. If someone's not over a specific threshold, they might have to do specific extra work with us to strengthen something to try and avoid anything from happening on the ice. But then the other side of things that we see from an upper body standpoint is a lot of AC joint dislocations and separations, all from contact. Those are pretty common. And they're even more common with our guys who have had previous AC injuries. We have a handful that have had surgery on those. And even with surgery, there's only so much that can hold down those bones to re-separate again. So we tend to do with those specific guys too, a lot of shoulder specific work. We do a lot of lateral raises, rear delt raises, internal and external rotation. Our athletic trainers do a lot of like body blade work and stabilization work with those guys. And another thing that we're trying to look into is just body fat and upper body strength and how that musculature and that body fat can provide some extra cushioning for joints. And I think there is somewhere out there's some research on man games lost in the NHL with some sort of body fat measurement and how body fat can correlate to lower man games lost just because there's extra protection there. And a name that I remember a couple of years ago brought this up is Anthony Donskov had talked about body fat and protection and almost as armor for those injuries. And we're trying to look at upper body muscle mass as sort of that same thing. So that's something that we're looking into and taking body weight and lean mass and fat mass and looking at what kind of certain cutoffs are for AC injuries.
It's interesting. So lifting more upper body could be a preventative for AC injury is sort of what you're saying.
Yeah, I think both from obviously the strength perspective, it's going to hold bones into place a little bit better. But then from a if you have a huge delt, you might have 2 inches of padding before your collarbone versus someone might only have an inch and a quarter or something.
Yeah, that's kind of cool actually. I never thought about that. I wonder if they do that with football too, because I'm sure they get a lot of like linemen and big guys. Like, I wonder if there's any sort of correlation there.
Yeah, there is probably.
That'd be interesting. That's cool. I never thought about that. Damn. Anyway, so just kind of sum it up a little bit. I guess I try to just say, hey, like if there's tips for young athletes coming either from the youth standpoint, college, whatever, like what kind of tips would you, give, especially from a strength and conditioning standpoint, how important it is, how it can be really helpful for them to, obviously prevent injury, help them with performance. Cause you've been through, all the levels and, gone through a lot and, seen from different perspectives, especially with sports science, strength conditioning. So kind of elaborate on what your thoughts are on there.
Yeah. I mean, there for sure is a plethora of research showing that strength and conditioning and playing multiple sports is going to help a young athlete. And I've seen it, I worked in the private sector for a little bit myself. So I've seen it with, 13-year-olds and 11-year-olds in middle school starting strength and conditioning. And I've seen it with kids trying to make the jump into pro hockey and being, 18, 19 years old and not having that background. And it is a drastic difference. And I think the one thing I can say to younger athletes is there's really nothing that's off limits in terms of what you should be training. I think when we get people in here, we're doing testing on every aspect of strength and conditioning. We're doing aerobic fitness tests, we're doing anaerobic fitness tests, we're doing strength, we're doing power, we're doing speed, we're doing movement, and we want to see a really well-rounded athlete. There's a lot of people that might be really strong, but haven't done any sprinting, and now that's limiting their foot speed on the ice and they can't chase down a puck. But then on the other end of the spectrum, we might have kids that are really fast, but they can't utilize that speed because they're losing the puck all the time because a bigger defenseman is battling them against the boards and stealing it. And then with all of those, we have people that maybe don't focus enough on conditioning and don't move as well by working on mobility and stability exercises. So then when they get tired, they're at a higher risk of injury because they're not moving as well. Or even if their conditioning is good, they're just not great movers in general, and their risk of injury goes even higher. So there's really no aspect, I personally think, of strength and conditioning for a young athlete that should be not taken seriously. I think as you get older, once you get into the later stages of high school and then going into college or junior hockey, whatever your path is, you can start, seeing what your deficiencies are and going from there. But I would bet that the highest predictor of off ice success is just your starting age, how early you start and then how consistent you are throughout the years.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tim. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation. I learned a lot for sure about hockey. And I mean, other areas of just like, sports science and how you utilize, different things. I mean, a lot of the stuff kind of overlaps. So it's not like you can't use this in any other place. So appreciate it. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Julian. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Train to Perform with Julian Sisman. Learn how you can work with Julian in a personal training session, either online or in person, at prepareforperformance.com. And follow on social media for more tips on training, fitness, and sports performance. On Twitter @JSisman_PFP and Instagram @prepareforperformance.